Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Clewley, Head of Culture and Business Strategy at the City of London Corporation, and I'm delighted to introduce my fantastic panel for this discussion today called Our City Together, How Culture, Collaboration and Creativity Can Support Londoners' Wellbeing during this Mental Health Week and Creativity and Wellbeing Week. Firstly, we have Charlie Clift, who's a photographer and creator of the Let's Talk Photography and Mental Health campaign. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. Hello.
And welcome to Dr. Cerisse Gunasinghe, excuse me.
Gunasinghe, Gunasinghe.
Thank you.
Hi.
Who is the Post-doctoral Research Associate and Counselling Psychologist at King's College London, who is project coordinator over the HYPE project, improving the health of young people, and co-lead for the Health Inequalities Research Network. Welcome, Cerisse.
Thank you.
Laura Muldoon, who is the social media manager for the Museum of London, or the recently rebranded Museum for London. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least is award-winning social entrepreneur Yemisi Mokuolu of Hatch Ideas Worldwide, which supports amazing people and organisations get their cultural and social change projects off the ground. Welcome, Yemisi. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. And I'm really looking forward to a fantastic discussion about what is a very live issue right now. Just in terms of setting the scene, I think if somebody had asked us in January, guess what, by mid-March, the whole world will be living in lockdown. I think very few of us would have thought that is something that is feasibly going to happen. And if you were to manufacture a situation which would be detrimental and damaging to people's mental health, it might go something along the lines of this. You take away and stop all the things that people look forward to in their lives, seeing friends, going on holiday, going to the theatre, going to pubs, going to restaurants, etc. And then you add in a lot of job insecurity. And then finally you put on an unknown end date. And I think, for the best of us, that is going to be a really challenging situation to deal with. And I think, like many people and many organisations, the City of London Corporation has had a huge reappraisal recently from our social and cultural role during this time. And this is where the genesis of our City Together campaign came out, in terms of how we can bring people together around a positive response in terms of what we have as assets and opportunities and expertise. And we've brought together a fantastic range of art, culture and London history expertise and content, and coupled that with a mental health and wellbeing message through our partnership with Thrive London. And this is something, I think, which we only launched yesterday, but something in terms of trying to do something of value and benefit for people during this time. But before we delve into the here and now, I'd just like to invite Cerisse just to outline some of the historic research and understanding of the relationship between culture, creativity and well-being for us, please.
Okay. Well, gave this a bit of thought and wondered what would be the main message that we'd want to think about. And I think first of all, we've got to think, right, what are we meaning by culture? And if we're thinking about the arts or creative arts, then that's the framework in which I think this discussion is about today. Yeah. So then we want to think about whether we're thinking it's in relation to art therapies, so as an intervention for mental health, or if we're thinking about more like participatory art programs or events or activities that the public can attend. So there's kind of lots of different issues or different parts of culture and art that maybe
it's a very dynamic relationship, I think.
Yeah. So I had to then think about the research in relation to those things. So then it brings us to thinking about, well, okay, so what does research or evidence base look like? And so if you're in the camp of thought that randomized controlled trials being the gold standard to build an evidence base or to argue whether art participation or art therapies are helpful for people's mental health, then unfortunately we're a bit limited in the literature that we've got, or there can be limitations about the published research that's out there. So that's a bit tricky. But if you're like me and you are a mixed methods researcher, and the colleagues within my group, or the group that we work with at King's College London and the Health Inequalities Research Network, we think more about how we can understand the qualitative benefit and the what you can get from arts participation and art therapy. And actually, when you hear about those narratives and you hear the impact that art can have, then you feel more encouraged, and then you feel that actually the research is building some momentum, and it's building some strength, together with some of that quantitative longitudinal data that can come out from more robust studies. So we then think about how we can integrate what we learned through the research to our clinical practice or our community programs. And I suppose for me, as a counselling psychologist by training, it makes me think back to my work as a play therapist. And that was mainly with children and young people who had experienced early adversity. And so the framework was mainly around trying to create a safe, non-judgmental space for the young person to try to unlock their experiences of, I suppose it's their internal experiences, and be able to have a space to explore that in an environment that there is very little intervention from the therapist, but also it's mainly using free play. Mm-hmm. And actually, through that work, I think that's what has led to my interest and passions about encouraging people to engage with creative play. And actually, we can see that now the literature is showing that creative play can help with reducing anxiety. It can help in preventative ways, so it can sort of delay the onset of more severe mental health difficulties. It's a way of managing or coping with mental health, and actually just actually maintaining good health. So lots of benefits, lots of ways in which I feel that creative art and now participation can help people. As well as that, we know that actually an environment that connects people who feel maybe excluded or marginalised or not. So yes, right now we're very much dealing with feeling quite isolated, or sometimes not able to connect with our loved ones or people that we spend time with. So, in that way, bringing people together, it can have that additional benefit. So I could go on for a very long time, but maybe that's enough as a way of maybe setting the scene around the evidence and the research that we know of, and how valuable creative arts is for the human experience.
Thank you, Cerisse. That's really helpful. I think one of the things you said around creating a safe, non-judgmental space is really important, and something I think you'd like to touch on. I think Charlie, from your experience, I guess, with the Let's Talk project as well, how from your experience did, I guess, some of the things that Cerisse just highlighted there around that kind of openness and the importance of providing that non-judgmental space and that opportunity form your approach?
I think it's absolutely key. And there's two things that really stood out for me, which I'll address one and then the next. The first is sort of my own story with mental health. So everyone goes up and down, but I went particularly down when I was in my second year at university, and ended up having to drop out of my studies and move back home with my parents and just sort of cut myself off from the world. It was a really bad time. And for the first 6 months, I didn't really pay attention to the world around me. I literally did anything to sort of distract myself from having to think. But it was only when I felt safe and able to talk and able to express myself a bit more that I started to understand what was going on in my head and started to get better. And the people who are really key to that, in my case, were my parents. But what I've discovered through my work is that can be anyone. It could be a friend, it could be a therapist, it could be, maybe even someone you don't know at all on the end of a helpline or a chat situation online. But as soon as you feel able and in a non-judgmental way to express your feelings and know that they won't be put down or made to feel bad, then suddenly you're able to get that out. And I think that's where art can be incredibly helpful. And actually, it was at that same time that I started getting more and more into photography. And I think it was a really important thing for me to help me get back out into the world, to have a reason to go somewhere and to do something and to start playing and expressing myself. And that idea of play, I think, is really interesting, that for some reason in children we call it play, but in adults we have to call it music or drama or art or whatever we want to call it. But ultimately, all those things that we're talking about, they are play, and they're a way of expressing ourselves by creating and trying stuff out. And I think they're also a way of doing something, failing and getting to try again, and no one really minds. In a lot of our modern world, we're seen to need to be perfect the first time. But if you ever come on one of my photo shoots, I'll probably take 500 photographs and maybe show you 2. And that ability to make mistakes is, I think, really, really important. And that's where being creative can do that. So when I moved on to then become a photographer as my career, I knew I wanted to use my photography to help other people talk about mental health. And that's what led to this project, Let's Talk. And it took a long time for me to sort of think, what's the best way to show what's happening inside someone's head? A lot of portraiture is trying to do that anyway through the expressions or body language or the moment you capture. But then I just struck upon this really simple thing of, why don't I interview people and then just write the words that they say straight onto their face? So the process for Let's Talk, everyone featured had struggles with mental health difficulties in some way, a big variety of difficulties. But I wanted to make sure it was their words in first person. So I would interview them over the phone, hear how they described wanting to take their own life or having a panic attack or whatever it was that they were really struggling with. And then I took the most poignant words and phrases and worked closely with an illustrator called Kate Forrester. And together we came up with sort of picking out the most key words and phrases. And she would then do this beautiful artwork, drawing the text onto people's faces for real. It'd take about 2 to 3 hours. And of course, the person had to sit there and be very aware that this was happening. And then afterwards, I photographed them and talked to them about how they feel about their life, the things they love, the things they struggle with. And that's what led to these photographs. The reason I did that was as a way, firstly, of me sort of discovering what, more about mental health and my own personal journey in that way, but also much more as a conversation starter for other people. I really hope that these pictures, much like loads of other arts and culture, can be a way of encouraging people to talk about things which maybe we're not used to talking about, or we find it more difficult to talk about. And I know that that's worked. I've had people send me emails, come up to me at events and all sorts of things and say, thank you so much. These pictures really helped me talked to my daughter about her difficulties, or I've sat down with my friend and we've come up with our own words. And I think as a way of just encouraging new types of conversation, art can really do that. And that chimes a lot with me, what Cerisse was saying about using art and creativity in play as a way of encouraging children to express themselves. And I think it's exactly the same in adults.
Fantastic. Thank you, Choi. And it's a wonderful project and a real, I think, testament to what you talked about around kind of highlighting those very personal things, but in the importance of opening up and having that conversation. I guess one question I was going to ask to Yemisi was around do you feel, I guess, that there's still those stigmas though in society, not only I guess in terms of opening up and kind of reflecting on your own personal mental health, but also I guess in terms of recognizing and understanding the tools of art and creativity to help people during that time?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Up until this moment, I think it probably only been in the last 9 months, there'd been real action around being able to talk about mental health issues. Okay. So people are now recognizing that they probably had underlying emotional and mental health issues. And it's almost, I don't know whether it was incidence or design, that these campaigns have been starting to come up more into the mainstream, that people now have access to mindfulness apps or being able to gently have conversations about their own mental health concerns with their families and even with themselves. So, we're still, I think, as a human race in the beginnings of these more open conversations. And the tools are, as we know, are still being refined. But there is a truth in terms of, the individual being able to even articulate. Sometimes when you're so crushed with anxiety, you can't even speak. And so, hopefully through sessions like this podcast, people can rest assured that that's okay, just lie down. If you have to lie down for 3 days, you have to lie down for 3 days, If you have to opt out for a year, you have to opt out for a year. And so the people that are receiving that information, I think that's where it's important, that your community around you, whether it's your employee, your employer, your friends and families, they are now becoming much more aware about how the effects of mental health can present themselves and what they can do. And I think that's been Charlie.
No, please finish.
I think that's what's been what I've been noticing anyway. The other thing I've been noticing is that I think people are now accepting that it's an individual journey. There was this whole, myself included, I already thought that when the Armageddon happens or whatever, when the apocalypse happens, I'll be the first one the aliens will take. I didn't realize that actually it would be sat at home watching reruns of Strictly. I really didn't. And being, having to take things in a completely much more sort of, for me anyway, more mundane, less kind of apocalyptic scenario. So I think people are now realizing that it's individual journeys. We're also understanding it's exposing a lot of the issues that were underlying, the socioeconomic ones. We're not starting to realize, but a lot of support now is there to recognize that it's not in isolation. Mm-hmm. So if you are on your own and you're relatively comfortable economically, you can still be as traumatized as, someone who is in a 20 packed, estate room. It's not about compare and contrast. So sorry for the long preamble, but in answer, I think we are now just more aware of the complexity, and it's just now something that is allowed to be in the mainstream. We're still ginger about how we talk about it, but at least finally it's a conversation that won't be ignored at the dinner table and put to one side by potentially your employer.
Thank you. Great comments there. Charlie, would you like to come back on some of those points?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point about stigma. And one of the things that I discovered through making my project was something I didn't expect to discover, but was incredibly powerful. And it's that everyone I photographed had multifaceted, really interesting, often incredibly successful lives, and that their mental health difficulties were just one part of them. And I think there's this real risk, or at least there was, of if you said, for example, I struggle with depression, that would then be the key label that you'd be hit with. Whilst if you look at some of the people I featured, take Alistair Campbell, for example, who's incredibly well known, you know, he's had this possibly controversial but very successful career, and he's done all that whilst dealing with quite severe struggles with depression and other difficulties. And of course, you can achieve so much even if you've got these. And I think once people start to realise that, and the more role models that come forward, like the young royals, for example, and these incredibly well-known people, people realise that this is everyone. Everyone struggles with this, and it won't be a stigma that marks you and brands you for life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'd just like to bring in Laura into the conversation, I guess, in terms of from the Museum of London, or now the Museum for London perspective, and the sort of journey that you have helped kind of lead in terms of the recognition of the role that cultural organisations and institutions can and should perhaps be playing at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit of, I guess, how that evolution kind of came about?
Yeah, so obviously, I guess the museum model works a lot on, well, in the minds of museum people. I'm a relatively new museum person myself. I've only worked at a museum for a bit over a year, so it's a new world to me too, and quite an interesting one. I think it's obviously based a lot on getting people to the museum, and for a long time has been a bit like, you can't see our stuff unless you come to the museum, which is a problem, I think, because there's whole swathes of people that will never even think of coming to a museum and would never want to come to a museum. So this like huge shift, I think, is a focus of like people not being able to come and see us, has made us thought, well, how do we still get to people? And how do we support the particularly school children, parents, teachers, and also people who are particularly vulnerable. So we have quite a big focus on people suffering with dementia and their carers. So how do we continue those programs in a way that will be effective? So the whole museum shifted, and we started thinking about how to get to people, and we internally shifted a lot as well. So, which has been actually a really good thing, because we've had people who would never imagine doing things now. It's been a real like all hands on deck, break everything open, rip up the rule book, and start again. And so we came up with the Museum for London kind of new creative strapline, just to signify this shift internally and to people externally. So, and we based it on the idea that we will continue providing best-in-class resources for families and teachers. And also, I think, and I feel like this is quite an overused word, we're doing things in a bit more of a mindful way and listening to the people in our museum who know their audiences best. So I work in the comms department, and potentially it's a bit like get people in the museum, my role. But now it's actually thinking more about how can we speak to the audiences in a way that they want to hear from us. So we're listening to the learning team who are saying, if you want to put out a live stream for kids, do it in the afternoon, because parents are generally structuring their day where they let kids do a bit more fun things in the afternoon. Or we're offering more than ever behind the scenes stuff from the museum to really let people see our inner workings, which a lot of museums I don't think personally do, because they're a bit scared of that, but in a good way. So obviously while the museum's closed, it's really tempting to like send people in there to film. But we do not want to set a bad example by people, not social distancing and continuing to do non-essential stuff. So however tempting that is, we've had to use old footage. And yeah, so our Memories of London programme, which was for people with dementia, which was a really carefully curated programme where people would and their carers would be invited to the museum to have special, almost one-on-one sessions to talk about memories, get up close with objects and smells and really incredible stuff. They've had to completely pivot that, and they've made it into, there's a podcast, a film coming out, and also they've made 1,000 packs to go out via community groups and food banks. So that's for people with dementia. And they're also, as part of our Culture Mile network, they're sending out children's activity packs through food banks and community centres as well. And our last little point on this is that we've also, which I think is really cool, our directors and senior management have redirected spend into our digital pot so we can promote our content using paid media on social media and other digital advertising to target those people so it gets to those people, which I think is amazing, because these are people that they might not come to the museum, but they probably use Facebook. And like, you don't want to say it, but it's true. So it's almost like an amazing opportunity that has to reach new people and new audiences, which we couldn't before because they wouldn't come to us.
Thank you, Laura. That's really great. There's some really good points in that. I think I guess just opening up in response to that and some of the positive things that have happened and what this strange, extraordinary experience has brought us. It feels like there has been perhaps this sort of time for reflection that people haven't had in their lives before, and maybe through just the necessity and the restrictions of the environments and challenges that there is, people have responded much more creatively than they perhaps would have before. What are your guys' thoughts in terms of that sort of experience and approach from what you've seen? Who would like to respond to that first? Charlie, do you want to be here?
I've seen, obviously, we all spend our own time in our own world on the internet, so maybe everyone's seen something completely different. And I follow a lot of creative people on my social channels and that kind of thing. And I've seen almost everyone pivot and start trying stuff in completely new ways. For example, I've been doing photo shoots via Zoom and FaceTime, which has been a completely weird experience, but actually I've learned a huge amount from it. And when you can't do fancy technical things, you take a different approach and you have a lot of fun with the concepts or with the way you interact with people. And I've seen so many creatives sort of dive in and start doing new things. And I think going back to that idea of creating things as therapy, I've also seen people expressing that difficulty through their work, how they feel is being shown. And I know that that's been incredibly supportive to many, many people out there, to see their emotions expressed, to be able to look at something and go, I feel like that. It's really good to know other people feel like that.
Hi.
Yeah.
What's been also interesting in terms of how people have been engaging with the arts is that their relationship with the arts has definitely become more meaningful. So, as a lot of the work that we do is we're making the case for creative industries and for the arts, trying to get a lot more support and engagement. And it always seemed like, how do you define the benefit of the arts? It's almost like, you can't see it like air, but you know that without it, you kind of need air. But what's been interesting is that people have been really actively engaging. So some of the smaller things like the show your 10 best albums or something. But what I find really nice about that is it's been allowing people to really listen to music, really listen to what the musician was trying to convey, and actually use that to take them on an emotional and cathartic journey, and sharing that experience, using it as a form of dialogue and being able to express aspects of themselves that they may not have been able to if they hadn't used the framework of a piece of art. There's even more gentle ways that people have been engaging with art, is that watching theatre pieces that they would not necessarily have had the time or the inclination or the interest, reading that book that they have been savagely against. But now it's like, I'm going to read it with my friends and we're going to like have a go at it. And, and we can talk about, what was that author really thinking, or reading that secret book that you didn't really want to read, but you're going to read it now. So, but what's also been lovely is the fact that people have now realize that they can use creativity as well. So writing poems, drawing, making up their own songs, interweaving it within even their dining experience. So they're doing things like come dine with me, but also curating the experience. So they're doing their own home events. And just to finish, I think what's also been really important is that I think people understand now more than ever, without having articulated the fact that we need creative space. And sometimes that is just being with yourself and just making or doing. And as you said, playing and really finding value in just that moment, 45 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, to play. And yes, as adults, we like to make sure it has a good, professional, structured word behind it. I am writing a song. But we all know that you're just locking yourself away and you're just having a good time. So yeah, it's been a really solid moment for people to define or develop their relationship with their art and with creativity.
Definitely. There's so many good points from what you guys said then. I was thinking about just in terms of the just walking the local streets, and just as one example, just seeing the number of houses with hand-drawn rainbows and messages to NHS and Kiwi is such a simple, beautiful thing. In fact, I did see somebody had made their own Ofsted rated sign in their window yesterday and put really bad instead of any sort of official rating. That made me chuckle. But I think
sorry, I'm so happy you said that, because right at the beginning of this, I can't remember the opera singer, but in Italy, he sang in one of their churches and they called it Music for Hope. Oh my God, even thinking about it now makes me well up.
It's beautiful, wasn't it? Yeah.
But I just think about the power behind that, music for hope, and so people's relationship is undefined, and long may it remain undefined. Let it be something that we feel, but let us also respond to the fact that, yes, without the music we're listening to, the books we're reading, and, we saw this on Facebook, and the films we're watching, can you imagine how we would get through this?
I agree. I was thinking as well, can you imagine if this had happened in the 80s, the 90s, before we had all this digital technology? We're having to fax one another or send each other floppy disks or handwritten
No, but we
letters.
would sing and we would dance and we would read and we would still,
Yeah, Charlie, sorry.
What I found really interesting is how the sort of cultural leaders, if you want to call them that, the most well-known musicians in the world all got together and put on this massive charity performance. But that's also happened amongst my friends. I've had, there's a friend of mine who I play music occasionally with, and he's been recording his own musical pieces and then sharing it with his friends over WhatsApp and Facebook. And I think on the sort of whole worldwide level, this has happened, bringing millions and millions of people together. But within our little bubbles as well, that's still happening. And like you're saying, people are making rainbows so that other kids can see as they're walking around, and it's everywhere. It's permeated through every aspect of society, and I think it's people trying to deal with what's happening. They're doing something. They're creating to cope.
Definitely. I'm Cerisse, just to bring you back in, I guess, in terms of what the next steps might be or should be in terms of this evolution and this relationship between creativity and mental health. What steps and what signs do you see that things are moving more positively, or what sort of research do you think needs to happen to sort of support that?
Oh, there's so much there. I think for me, I guess what a lot of us need to do right now is just allow each day to unfold as it will, because for us to start understanding the impact of this, we also need to get through it. So I think where we've launched our research into understanding the health and social impact this pandemic has had or is having on young people through the HIGH project a few weeks ago. And so what we're trying to do through that is to understand what the needs are in the moment, and therefore to then be able to provide resources. So we have a page where we offer things to do at home, or things you can do that require you to be physically present elsewhere. And that includes virtual tours of museums. We also have like physical activity, parts of that, accessing debt advice, accessing support for loss and bereavement, and all of those things are really important for now. What we hope that through collecting information through our survey is to understand, well, what do we need to then think about longer term, and how do we need to put in place support that can be available for people, once the physical health crisis or the physical distancing changes. So there's that part of it, but also there's also the part of focusing and attending to the positives that are coming through this experience. Yes, people are really struggling, and we need to find a way of increasing those voices and getting to those people, because I think that's the thing that maybe I think we talked about briefly yesterday, but might not come up so much today, is that not everyone can access a device that means that they can engage with the remote or online resources that we're offering. So we're trying to think a little bit more creatively, and also go to our community organisations and ask how do we reach those people who are not able to access these great activities and resources that are going to be helpful. So that's another piece of the work that we're trying to do, is to reach out to the people that can't get to these activities or events. And it's also thinking about as well we brought it up already, the complex nature of it and the intersectionality. So we've heard that there is lots of disproportionate incidences of COVID experiences in the BAME population or community groups, and it's trying to understand what's going on for those individuals and those families, trying to think about how we can pull together our data and our resources to get a better grasp about what's going on. So there's lots of work to do for us as researchers, but it's also to not distract from the fact that people just need that kindness. So actually, right now, I think the theme around Mental Health Awareness Week is kindness matters.
Yes.
So that's really important, and we need to make sure that we spread the kindness to others, but to ourselves. So, I'm really, really glad that what's coming out more recently, or there's a movement towards people's self-care. And actually, it's okay to put yourself first, and it's okay to be, one of the other sayings is selfish is not I can't think of it now. My brain's gone. Selfish is not. No, self-care is not selfish. There we go. Self-care.
Got it.
Got there in the end. Self-care is not selfish, and that's a really important part of, I think, the now. So, I think it's to just not forget that our personhood needs care, taken care of, and we hope that in time, as we start to pull together, the data resource and the information, we can sort of attend to the things that are unequal in our communities and address the both social and health inequality amongst us right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Cerisse. That was brilliant. Some fantastic points there. Totally agree with that kindness. And I'm making a note of that selfish line as well. That's my mantra.
I remembered it eventually.
No, it's great. Laura, I think in terms of the next steps, there's still a lot of unknowns, I guess, from a industry and sector point of view for culture, for tourism, for creatives, especially individuals and smaller middle enterprises, around how, perhaps in some ways, the real challenges may come when we come out of this and we see what the landscape looks like. But do you get a sense that this more mindful, considerate approach is something that is going to stay and take root? I'm really heartened, I think, by how London has responded to this, and through the leadership of the mayor and other kind of like leaders in the culture sector and the tourism industry, that this sort of sense of solidarity is really strong, and London as a place throughout history, for 2,000 years has kind of endured adversaries and challenges, and London has come together during these times. What do you sort of take, I guess, forward in terms of like from where you are at the moment and conversations you've been had in terms of how that can maintain and grow?
Well, I can't really comment on, like the long-term strategy of what will happen to museums in London, or our museum in particular. I can only comment on my experiences of this new way of working that we've had recently, and just that, like, I would love it if it meant that our like digital channels and the way we're communicating, like we're not just using them to shout about getting people to come to our museum, we're instead using them more mindfully to educate people in like what we do, the stories we tell about Londoners, and to sort of change that model from come visit us to just like let's all learn together and be able to talk to more people. And I hope that like shifts permanently, to be honest, and that museums move away from like wanting to keep their sort of treasures under lock and key and not share them, because I think like the bigger channels we have and the more people we can reach from our museum and all museums is amazing. So I try and stay positive. Like, it's a horrible situation now, obviously, but like I do try and like see the opportunities and the positive bits about how we've been able to talk in new ways to people. So I hope that continues. And because we've had like less people doing like the physical side of museum work, we've been able to get them to help us with the digital content, and it's just become so much richer and like having those people engaged. And I just hope that we continue to make that really amazing quality #content.
Thank you, Laura. It's a great comment. Would anyone, I guess, like to echo or respond to that?
Yeah, we've been doing, we work with creative businesses and cultural organisations. That's, the core of the work that we do. And, just want to echo that thing about thinking about yourself. We've always been led to be giving. But, a lovely saying that I came across was, you can't pour from an empty jug. And, in a situation like this, we really need to be there, looking after ourselves, nurturing ourselves, using the arts as creatives, as producers, also our audiences. Sometimes just by reading a book quietly, you don't know who's watching or who's understanding what you're doing quietly in that process and what that can mean for others. So that was just to echo that, really do serve, really do look after yourself. And then in terms of like the arts and, moving forward in this situation, I've again, it's really, I've been very impressed with the Mayor's Office and London organisations in terms of their capacity to share their mistakes, share their learning, but also being able to come together around some key issues that we can work together in terms of how do we survive, let's call it what it is, how do we survive the situation, whatever it is, economically, mentally, emotionally, how do we achieve all those wonderful, better things that we spent all of our careers trying to do. This could be the moment, but there are some, but what I would say to a lot of creatives is that communicate within your network, communicate with yourself, listen to your audience. This is a time whereby we have to take things day by day. So mistakes there's no such thing as mistakes anymore, really, let's be honest, I would say, support yourself and support others. But let's kind of like be purposeful enough within ourselves to know what we can achieve. And there's another wonderful thing that I've been hearing is that it is a marathon and it's a relay marathon, which is so confusing to me.
That sounds awful.
It's so confusing to me. But when you do it with a family, when you do it with a team of people, actually, I have moments where genuinely this weekend, I couldn't do anything, but I was able to pass the baton on to others, within my family or within my team. And today I've carried the baton, and we can collectively be responsive to each other and to the wider issues as well. It's a bit of a preamble, sorry, but I think that I don't even think I know that there's a role for creativity in all aspects. Anyway, that's why I do what I do. Even more so now, we can use our creativity and to be able to support in all the innovations from the recovery strategy to the communication strategy. So to digress, but one of the things that I found incredible was how the current government, the communication that they were sending out seems to be very singular. And what I really enjoyed was seeing how people were using creativity to help others understand what the government was actually trying to say. And without that generosity and without that being able to articulate, so like our comedians, our storytellers, they really came to the front, our musicians, really helping us to get to grips with what a single message like stay at home, I'm sorry, was a trigger for me. I'd spent a month just in anxiety, total anxiety, because when I hear stay at home, it translates to me as you can't have the access to the support that you need. You can't. So I absolutely, but with musician friends of mine who gently was sending me little tracks that they've been tinkering with on YouTube or sharing it more widely, I started to realize subliminally, actually, stay at home isn't how the government have like singularly presented it. It's just an action that we have to do. Stay at home can still be quite an inclusive place to be in. So yeah, the creative industry's creativity has a massive role to play in terms of how we are managing ourselves through this current crisis.
Definitely. Sorry, Charlie, yes.
I just think it's at times when that there is a new normal. It's times when the things that we're used to doing from the past are no longer relevant, that people who are most creative and most most happy to try and fail, to play with new ideas, all these different ways we've phrased it. But it's the creative people who come up with what the new normal is going to be. It's not going to be people who are following the rules from earlier on who decide how the future is going to look. It's going to be the people who take this as an opportunity and try stuff out. And if we don't try it, we don't know what's going to work. So I think people who are thinking creatively in all areas of society, not just the traditionally creative areas, but in every single area of society, they're going to be the ones who decide how we come out of this, a lot more than the people who try and follow the old rules.
Definitely. That's a really good point. Was there any other points, I guess, just to respond to those two excellent points there at all from you, Cerisse or Laura? Some fantastic comments, I think, off the back of that. I think it's really, really powerful, like some of the things that you guys have mentioned, just been taking some notes here. I really love that sentiment around self-care as not being selfish, and you cannot pour from an empty jug. I think is so true. But I think also that kind of those really important things that are principles which we need to kind of bear in mind going forward around the importance of freedom to make mistakes, playing, creativity, allowing us the space to do that. And I also think the other thing I found really striking through this experience is that it's really allowed that sense that you don't always get in your day-to-day life of acknowledging the things that you often take for granted. And that can be people, it could be friends, it could be relationships, it could be family. But it can also be, experiences and things like, the kind of just the simple thing of kind of, meeting friends in the park or in the pub or wherever, and just hanging out. And we are very social animals, human beings, it's a very unusual situation to take away those things. I think that's where the fundamental challenges have been, maybe with young people. My kids are 5 and 2. They don't understand that they can't see their friends and that they can't, hang out together and all that sort of stuff. So I think there is an ongoing evolution and support that we will need to support young people, especially going forward, I think. Sorry, Yemisi, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer to this, but we had a session, we've been running these weekly business breakfast sessions just to help our network and our community to kind of keep their resilience through this time. And we had one on managing your mental health, and the psychologist that we had on, one of the things that she did say, which struck a chord with me, is that if you look at the things that you've assessed have been taken away from you, it's about creating ways of bringing some of that back in. And I'm sure that, if not all of us, have been engaging in pub quizzes online. But in my own way, I definitely thrive on interacting with people. And it's that permission piece. And I think it goes back to what I was saying, that stay-at-home message, I think, was not presented as well as it could have been. And for a lot of people, it didn't have the right messaging. And so being able to give out these examples of what stay at home can look like, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're so far removed from people. Being able to understand that this is not a permanent state. A lot of people are really worried about what will events, a lot of the businesses we're working with, they're really worried about what will events look like post-COVID. People really understand the benefit of being in a crowd and what that can be like, and the negative aspects as well. But what we have to do is make sure that all the things that are being taken away, we are mindful enough to think about how can we eke some of the benefits back. And that can be, and that's a brave leap, and it's a huge step, and it's not, and everyone keeps saying the new normal. I'm struggling with that one as well. That's another concept I'm struggling with. I liked my old normal, but but I think the word is very much, let's be kind of like clear. this is a moment, and we have to work collectively to make sure that we do not throw away the things that we vitally need, in sort of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's another good one. Yep. So, so I think we have to just be very mindful to be clear about what it is that we do need. So if you do need to interact with people, and we're now able to sort of see a few people now at distance, do the precautions, but don't rob yourself of the things that you need.
Definitely. Yeah, fantastic point. Was there any, I guess, final comments or thoughts, I guess, before we draw to a close? Any of you'd like to share? No? Oh, Laura, go for it.
Only that I've very much enjoyed this conversation, and I found it really uplifting.
Me too.
And lots of little nuggets that I feel like I need to write these catchphrases down and put them on my desk in my eye line for when I'm feeling a bit especially the stuff about there's no such thing as mistakes anymore, and it's so true. And it's nice to hear. It's kind of nice to hear that.
Definitely.
I think there's one thing I have found that's come out of this weird world we now live in, and I really hope that carries on, and that's that it's become completely normal, and almost every conversation I've been part of, to ask people how they're doing and genuinely mean it. Yes. Because in the past you'd say, "Hey, how are you?" and everyone would go, "Oh, I'm great, thanks." And now that's not the case. People genuinely answer with honesty. And I really hope that stays, because it just shows that not everyone is okay. And in fact, a lot of the time, most people aren't. And it's fine to say that and to talk about that. And let's hope that carries on.
Oh, and I feel like I'm going to say one more thing. You made me think of something else. Sorry. Another thing the psychologist said. So one of the people on the call, they said that they were getting frustrated. So they work from home, so they they're not feeling what a lot of people are feeling, and so they're getting really frustrated with their colleagues because it took some of their colleagues 10 days to set up, or they keep going offline because it's too stressful for them. They can only do 2 days of work or whatever it is. Yeah. And the truth is, and it's just as echoing what Charlie said, is that at this point, we have to just allow and accept people to be able to feel how they feel. We've grown up in a professional kind of pseudo culture that people have to be automatons and robots, and they can't bring their humanity to the piece. Yeah. My daughter now enjoys the hilarity of jumping in on a call because she's waiting for that magic moment so she can be on YouTube or something. But what's nice is that people that are receiving that, if they do see her kind of come into the background, instead of that, that tutting, that judgy, instead of that, that's gone. It's really peeled away. And yes, please, let's ensure that comes, once we come off of Zoom Live or whatever it is, or online interactions, let's walk into a room more so our human selves, as opposed to this kind of facade or fabrication of the professional person that we think we should be for society's benefit, because we now realize it doesn't benefit anybody. It's a hard lesson, because if it did, we wouldn't be staying at home.
I suppose if I can leave a parting thought maybe as well, is that to encourage people to engage with their playful selves. So that playful part of you that you maybe say you quieten, or you say, "Oh, now's not time for play." Have a think about how you look after that playful part of you, and try and embrace that some more, and in whatever aspect that is, because it's okay to be a child from time to time, and give yourself that permission.
That's a wonderful sentiment, I think, to close on. It just brings me to say thank you so much, everybody, for your wonderful contributions to this conversation. I think it's been, just echo what Laura said, it's been really fascinating. It's been lovely to spend this time with you. I hope when we come out of this, we should all do this in an environment of our choice, maybe a nice pub or cafe or in the park, and follow it on from there. But thank you so much from my side. It's been absolutely fascinating and wonderful to speak to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For the opportunities. Yeah, lovely to meet you all.
Me too.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, bye.